to Berlin and speak to Ben Aris, Editor-in-Chief of Business New Europe. Ben, always a pleasure to have you on. OK, so some projections suggest that United Russia could actually lose its current two-thirds majority. That's on Associated Press. I haven't seen those particular projections. What do you think?
Well, I think it's fairly clear that United Russia will win and win a majority. In this case, there's 450 seats up for grabs, and it needs a minimum of 226. And I think there's no doubt that it will, quote unquote, win those, in so much as the Kremlin's in a position to fix the election through various means. One of the issues is that exactly how much it will get. And the targets are the minimum of 226, but if it gets 300, it has a constitutional majority. And the Kremlin has this calculation to make of just how far they can push the envelope. Will they push it so that it gets 300 and a constitutional majority so they can change the constitution like they did earlier this year? But if it does do that, it runs the risk of sparking mass protest. We saw this play out earlier last year in Belarus, where Lukashenko, the president there, fixed the results. He's thought to have actually won about 30%, and the Central Election Committee declared that he had won 80%. And within hours of the polls closing, there were mass protests, which have been going on ever since. And that's the problem for the Kremlin. It's a hybrid system. There is a genuine support for United Russia. I mean, that they can command at least 35%. The issue is, at the same time, that they don't command enough a vote so that they can guarantee a majority. And so the Kremlin, on the one hand, has to have a legitimate vote in support in order to avoid protests. But on the other hand, it's not going to get the majority it wants, so it has to cheat. And how much it cheats is the key here, because if it cheats too much, then again you'll spark mass protest, and they simply don't want to go there. They don't, that would end up in a color revolution and all those scenarios. And so it's a delicate balancing act between the two. The exit polls I've seen so far are putting United Russia at about 49%, 48%, which is enough to give it majority, with some fixing that's already gone on. What the end result will be, we'll have to wait until tomorrow.
We've got an opposition politician, Ilya Yashin, who, because of connections with Alexei Navalny, is not allowed to stand. But Yashin has cast a ballot in Moscow, speaking to the Associated Press, saying, "I don't have high expectations from these elections because there are almost no parties on the ballot that represent people's interests." I mean, apparently the official figures are a turnout of about 40%. But we've heard over the past few days so many people saying the same thing as Ilya Yashin, that actually, yes, I am voting, but I realize that actually my vote probably won't make a difference, and they're not the people that I would truly like to vote for. So 40% turnout in terms of, if that's an overall feeling of people going to the ballot box, are you surprised that it's that high or that low?
Well, again, it's hard to say. I mean, like I said, that there is a genuine support for United Russia. People remain extremely grateful to Putin and the Kremlin, because in the 90s, it's hard to overemphasize how hard life was. I mean, the economy totally collapsed. The system totally collapsed. People were living on $10 a month when you had inflation running at 1,400%. And it was not affordable. And Putin brought stability and returned prosperity. The economy doubled under him. So there is a solid vote, and people are afraid of going back to the 90s. This isn't about making Russia better. This is about preventing the chaos that was before, and Putin represents that stability. And so there is a genuine support for him. People will come out and put him back into office. But Yashin is typical. I mean, he's right. There's no alternative. On the one hand, the opposition, such as it is, has been completely crushed. And what's been surprising, particularly about this elections, is that the Kremlin seems to have run out of ideas. They have nothing to offer because we've had 6 years of income stagnation, and so the people are unhappy. They want progress again, and United Russia and the government have not delivered that. So United Russia is actually more unpopular than it's ever been, even though it has this core voter base. And someone like Yashin, there is no alternative party to vote for, but at the same time, the opposition remains highly fragmented, and the infighting between them for the liberal vote splits the vote. Ironically, that allows United Russia to win in seats where actually it can poll like 35% in a particular race, but because the opposition votes are split between the infighting between the various parties, such as they are, means that it can still take a victory with an extremely low percentage of the population for it. And this is Russia's problem. The opposition hasn't come up with any alternative policies, and the candidates that may have stood, on the one hand, Navalny is put in jail. The other candidate that could have challenged the Kremlin, Boris Nemtsov, was assassinated a few years ago. And that leaves Russians without much of a choice. And so another problem the Kremlin has to fight against is apathy, is getting the turnout. In the last elections, there was 45% turnout, and 40% is still actually low because that also delegitimizes the elections. And so the Kremlin needs to see slightly higher turnout. And again, I think tomorrow, once you take into account all the fixed races, we've already got reports of some regions where the voter turnout has been 97%, which is total nonsense. You'll find that the overall number will be a bit higher, around 45%, I would guess.
Ben, thank you so much. Always appreciate the analysis. Ben Aris speaking to us from Berlin.